Captain Jiho stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the stars move slowly past the main screen. 3 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Federation. 3 months of careful steps and polite words. 3 months of proving that humans could be trusted partners in this vast community of alien races. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of engines and the gentle beeping of computers. Communications Officer Nari sat at her station, monitoring the usual chatter between Federation ships. Engineer Taehyun worked at the engineering console, running his daily checks on all systems. Marine Commander Jiwon reviewed security reports from her station near the back. Everything seemed normal. Just another routine patrol along the outer rim, far from the busy trade routes and diplomatic centers where most Federation business happened. Jiho liked these quiet missions. They gave his crew time to learn their new ship and practice working together. The Defiant was humanity's first deep space vessel, designed specifically for Federation service. She looked like any other Federation ship from the outside, but Jiho knew she carried the best technology Earth could provide. Hidden beneath her peaceful exterior were systems that could handle almost any situation the galaxy might throw at them. "Captain," Nari called out suddenly, her voice sharp with concern. "I'm picking up something strange." Jiho turned toward her station. "What kind of strange?" "It's a transmission, sir. Wideband broadcast on all emergency frequencies, but it's broken up badly. Like it's coming from very far away or through heavy interference. Can you clean it up?" Nari's fingers moved quickly over her controls. "I'm trying, sir. The signal is very weak and it keeps cutting out." Jiho walked over to stand behind her chair. On her screen, he could see the wave patterns of the signal, jumping up and down like a heart monitor reading of someone having a heart attack. "There," Nari said, adjusting another control. "I think I've got something." The bridge speakers crackled with static. Then, through the noise, they heard a voice. It spoke in broken galactic standard, the common language used by most Federation species. The voice sounded desperate, afraid. "Warning. Warning to all species. Do not engage the humans in conflict. They are not what they appear to be. Learn from our mistake before it is too." The signal cut off suddenly, leaving only empty static. The bridge fell silent. Jiho felt a cold feeling in his stomach. He looked around at his crew. They all stared back at him with worried expressions. "Play it again," Jiho said quietly. Nari replayed the message. The words were the same, but hearing them a second time made them even more disturbing. Someone out there was warning the galaxy about humans. But why? What mistake had they made? "Can you trace where it came from?" Jiho asked. "Working on it, sir." Nari bent over her controls, her face lit by the glow of her screens. "The signal bounced off several relay stations, but I think I can track it back to its source." Taehyun spoke up from his station. "Captain, if someone is broadcasting warnings about humans, shouldn't we report this to Federation Command?" Jiho thought about that. The smart thing would be to call their superiors and let them handle it. But something about the message bothered him. The fear in that voice had been real. Whoever sent that warning had been truly terrified. "Not yet," Jiho decided. "Let's find out more first. Nari, how's that trace coming?" "Got it, sir. The signal originated from a system about 6 light years from here. But according to my charts, that system is supposed to be empty. No planets, no stations, nothing but an old red dwarf star." "Maybe the charts are wrong," Jiwon suggested. "Or maybe someone's hiding something out there." Jiho nodded. "Set course for those coordinates. Maximum warp." "Sir," Taehyun said carefully, "we're supposed to stay on our assigned patrol route. If we leave without permission—" "I'll take responsibility," Jiho interrupted. "Something is very wrong here, and I want to know what it is." The Defiant changed course, her engines humming louder as she jumped to warp speed. The stars stretched into lines on the main screen as space folded around them. 6 hours later, they dropped out of warp at the edge of the system. What they found made everyone on the bridge gasp in shock. The system wasn't empty at all. Floating in space around the red dwarf star were the remains of what had once been a massive fleet. Hundreds of ships, all dark and broken. Some had been blown apart completely, leaving only scattered debris. Others drifted intact but lifeless, their hulls scarred by weapons fire. "My God," Taehyun whispered. "What happened here?" Jiho studied the wreckage on the main screen. The ships were unlike any Federation design he had ever seen. They were big and aggressive-looking, covered in spikes and armor plating. Whoever had built them clearly believed in showing strength. "Nari, run those ship designs through the Federation database. I want to know who they belonged to." "Already on it, sir." Nari's fingers flew over her controls. A few minutes later, she looked up with a puzzled expression. "This is strange, Captain. The computer identifies these as Velakri ships. But that doesn't make sense. Why not?" "Because according to Federation records, the Velakri Empire vanished 50 years ago. No one knows what happened to them. They just disappeared." Jiho felt that cold feeling in his stomach getting worse. "Send out a scanning pulse. Look for any ships that might still have power or life support." The Defiant sensors swept through the debris field. Most of the ships were completely dead, but after several minutes they found one that still had minimal power. "There," Nari pointed to a large ship near the center of the wreckage. "That one's still got emergency power running. Maybe life support too. Any life signs?" "Negative, sir, but there might be computer systems still working. Data logs, maybe even recordings." Jiho made his decision. "Taehyun, prepare a shuttle. Ji-won, you're with me. We're going aboard that ship." "Sir," Ji-won said, "shouldn't we call for backup first? We don't know what killed these ships." "Whatever did this happened a long time ago," Jiho replied. "Look at the damage patterns. This wreckage has been drifting here for years, maybe decades." An hour later, Jiho and Ji-won floated through the airlock of the alien ship wearing full environmental suits. Their helmet lights cut through the darkness as they made their way down empty corridors. The ship was huge inside, much bigger than any human vessel. The corridors were wide enough for 3 people to walk side by side, and the ceilings were high overhead. Everything was built on a massive scale, as if the creatures who lived here had been much larger than humans. "Look at this," Ji-won said, stopping beside a wall panel. "These scratches in the metal, they look like claw marks." Jiho examined the marks. They were deep gouges in the wall, as if something with very sharp claws had raked across the surface. But the pattern was strange. The marks weren't random. They looked almost like writing. "Keep moving," he said. "Let's find the bridge or a computer terminal." They made their way deeper into the ship, following signs written in an alien script. The corridors were filled with debris and what looked like the remains of furniture. Everything had been torn apart, as if the ship had gone through a terrible battle. Finally, they found what looked like the command center. It was a large room filled with control stations arranged in a circle around a central platform. Most of the stations had been destroyed, their screens shattered, and their controls ripped out, but one station near the back still had power. Its screen glowed weakly in the darkness, showing alien text scrolling slowly upward. "Nari," Jiho spoke into his comm unit. "Can you access the translation protocols from here? I need to read what's on this screen." "Stand by, Captain." A few minutes later, Nari's voice crackled back. "Okay, I've linked into your suit's computer. You should be able to read Federation Standard now." The alien text on the screen suddenly changed into words Jiho could understand. What he read made his blood run cold. "Personal log, Admiral Zevros. Velakri Imperial Fleet. Day 47 of the human hunt. We thought this would be easy. A simple raid against a weak prey species. How wrong we were." Jiho's hands trembled as he scrolled through more entries. Day 53. 3 more ships lost today. The humans fight like demons. No, worse than demons. Demons have passion. These creatures fight with cold calculation that terrifies even our bravest warriors. Day 61. They're not trying to escape anymore, they're hunting us. How did we not see this before? How did we mistake apex predators for prey? Day 68. I'm transmitting this warning on all frequencies, hoping someone will hear it before they make the same mistake we did. Do not engage the humans in conflict. Do not trust their peaceful appearance. They are death itself wearing a gentle mask. The log ended there. Jiho scrolled back to the beginning and read the first entry. Day 1. Our scouts have located a human colony ship in the Kepler system. 50,000 civilians, mostly families and children. They appear to be refugees fleeing some disaster on their homeworld. Perfect slaves for the arena and the mines. We attack at dawn. Jiho felt sick. He understood now what had happened here. The Valkyrie had attacked human civilians, probably thinking they were easy targets. But somehow those civilians had fought back. And not just fought back, they had completely destroyed one of the galaxy's most powerful military forces. Captain, Jiwan's voice was quiet. You need to see this. She was standing beside another console, her face pale. 50 years earlier, the colony ship New Soul drifted through space like a wounded animal. Her hull was scarred with blast marks from Valkyrie weapons, and strange alien devices had been welded to her outer sections. Inside, the ship that had once carried 50,000 hopeful colonists to a new world had become a prison. Minho wiped sweat from his forehead as he worked on yet another broken Valkyrie machine. The alien device was twice his size, and made of some kind of dark metal that felt wrong to touch. He had been working in the engine rooms for 3 months now, ever since the Valkyrie had decided he was useful enough to keep alive. The Valkyrie guards thought he was just another broken human, doing what he was told to stay alive a little longer. They didn't know that every day Minho learned more about their technology. Every repair job taught him something new about how their ships worked, how their weapons functioned, how their systems could be turned against them. You, human slave, growled a voice behind him. Minho turned to see Guard Captain Breck standing in the doorway. The Valkyrie was nearly 8 feet tall, covered in thick scales that looked like armor plating. His yellow eyes glowed in the dim light, and his mouth was full of razor-sharp teeth. Yes, Captain, Minho said, keeping his voice quiet and respectful. He had learned early that the Valkyrie respected only strength and fear. Show them fear, and they might let you live another day. The power coupling in Section 7 is making noise again. Fix it. Right away, Captain. Brex watched him for a moment longer, then turned and stomped away. The Valkyrie moved like walking tanks, heavy and powerful. But Minho had noticed something in the past few weeks. For all their size and strength, they weren't very smart about technology. They knew how to use their machines, but they didn't really understand how they worked. That was going to be their downfall. Minho gathered his tools and made his way to Section 7. The corridors of the New Soul had been changed by the Valkyrie. They had torn out walls to make the passages wider for their bulk, and everything was lit by harsh red lights that hurt human eyes. As he walked, Minho passed other human slaves going about their daily tasks. Most kept their eyes down, too beaten and scared to look at anything except the floor. But a few met his gaze for just a moment, and in their eyes he saw something the Valkyrie hadn't noticed. Anger. Cold, patient anger that burned like a slow fire. The Valkyrie thought they had broken the human spirit. They were wrong. Minho reached Section 7 and began examining the power coupling. It was a simple fix. Just a loose connection that needed to be tightened. But while he worked, he carefully studied the power flow patterns. The Valkyrie used a centralized system that fed energy to all their critical systems from one main reactor. If someone knew how to access the right controls, they could shut down the entire ship in seconds. Good to know. Minho. The voice was barely a whisper, but he recognized it immediately. Yuna, his wife, was standing nearby pretending to clean a wall panel. Are you all right? He whispered back, not looking up from his work. I'm fine. But I found something today. Something important. Yuna worked in the medical bay, tending to injured human slaves. The Valkyrie allowed this because they wanted to keep their slaves healthy enough to work. What they didn't realize was that it gave Yuna access to information they couldn't get anywhere else. Tell me. I've been studying Valkyrie physiology, using the medical scanners when the guards aren't watching. They have a weakness, Minho. A big one. Minho's hands never stopped moving on the power coupling, but his attention was completely focused on his wife's words. Their nervous system runs on a very specific bioelectric frequency. If you could generate an electromagnetic pulse on exactly the right wavelength, it would disrupt their motor functions completely. They wouldn't be able to move for several minutes. How specific does the frequency have to be? Very specific. I have the exact numbers memorized. Minho smiled grimly. With access to the ship's power systems and Yuna's medical knowledge, they might actually have a chance. But they would need help. A lot of help. There's someone else we need to talk to, he said quietly. That someone was Donghae, a former Marine who had been on the New Sol visiting his family when the Valkyrie attacked. The aliens had put him to work in the cargo bays, thinking his military background made him too dangerous for more sensitive areas. What they didn't understand was that cargo bays gave him access to supplies and, more importantly, to other humans. Later that night, in the few hours when the Valkyrie dimmed the lights for their sleep cycle, Minho and Yuna made their way to the cargo hold. They found Donghae exactly where they expected, sitting in the shadows between two large containers talking quietly with a group of other humans. We need to talk, Minho said. Donghae looked up. He was a big man, almost as tall as the Valkyrie guards but broader through the shoulders. His face was hard and scarred from months of beatings, but his eyes were sharp and alert. About what? About fighting back. The other humans shifted nervously. Fighting back meant death if they were caught. The Valkyrie had made that very clear, from the beginning. I'm listening, Donghae said. Minho quickly explained what Yuna had discovered about Valkyrie physiology and what he had learned about their ship systems. As he talked, he watched Donghae's expression change from skeptical to interested to coldly furious. You're talking about a full takeover, Donghae said when Minho finished. Not just escape, complete control of the ship. That's right. And, after that? Minho was quiet for a moment. He had been thinking about that question for weeks now. What would they do if they actually managed to capture the ship? The smart thing would be to find the nearest Federation world and surrender to the authorities. But the Valkyrie had killed thousands of humans. They had enslaved children, forced families to fight each other for entertainment, treated human beings like animals. The smart thing might not be the right thing. We make them pay, he said finally. Donghae nodded slowly. I was hoping you'd say that. Over the next several weeks, they began to plan. Donghae used his access to the cargo bays to recruit more humans for their cause. He was careful to choose only people he trusted completely, former military personnel, engineers, anyone with skills that would be useful in a fight. Yuna continued her medical work, but now she was doing more than just treating injuries. She was mapping out every Valkyrie on the ship, studying their patrol routes and shift changes. She also began working on a way to generate the electromagnetic pulse she had discovered. Minho kept fixing Valkyrie machines. But now each repair job was also a chance to install hidden modifications, tiny changes that wouldn't be noticed unless someone knew exactly what to look for. Emergency shutoffs in critical systems, backdoors into computer networks, small surprises that could be activated when the time was right. The Valkyrie never suspected anything. They saw what they expected to see, broken human slaves doing whatever they were told to stay alive. The idea that these weak creatures might be planning something was so ridiculous that it never occurred to them. That was their first mistake. Their second mistake was underestimating human memory. Every insult, every beating, every casual cruelty was remembered. The humans didn't show their anger because they had learned that showing emotion only brought more punishment, but the anger was there, growing stronger every day. The breaking point came on a day that started like any other. Minho was working on a water recycling system when he heard shouting from the main corridor. He dropped his tools and ran toward the sound, along with dozens of other humans. In the central plaza, a large open area where the Valkyrie sometimes held their entertainment events, a crowd had gathered. At the center of the crowd, two Valkyrie guards held a small human boy, named Sunho. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old. This creature spilled food on my boots, announced Guard Captain Brex in his booming voice. Such clumsiness must be punished as an example to the others. Minho felt his blood turn to ice. He knew what was coming. They all did. The Valkyrie loved their discipline demonstrations. Please, said a woman in the crowd, Sunho's mother. He's just a child. He didn't mean to. Brex backhanded her casually, sending her flying across the plaza. Then he turned back to the boy. Weakness must be purged, he announced, drawing his sidearm. Minho looked around desperately, trying to catch Donghei's eye. They weren't ready yet. The plan wasn't supposed to happen for another week, but sometimes plans had to change. He found Donghei at the edge of the crowd. The former Marine was standing perfectly still, watching the scene with no expression at all. But Minho could see something terrible in his eyes, something that made even Minho take a step back. That was the moment. When human restraint finally snapped, Brex raised his weapon toward the child. Let this be a lesson to all of you pathetic. He never finished the sentence. The lights went out. In the darkness, Minho heard Yuna's voice over the ship's intercom system. Somehow she had managed to access the communications array. All humans, take cover. Electromagnetic pulse in 3, 2, 1. The ship's entire electrical system pulsed once, sending exactly the right frequency through every conductor. The effect on the Valkyrie was immediate. They collapsed where they stood, their nervous systems completely disrupted. Now! Donghei's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. What happened? The first Valkyrie world to fall was Korvax Prime, a military outpost on the edge of their empire. The defenders barely had time to send a distress signal before their orbital platforms went silent. Admiral Theron of the Valkyrie High Command stood in his war room, staring at the tactical display with growing disbelief. Red markers showed Valkyrie installations that had stopped responding. In just 2 weeks, 7 military bases in 3 colony worlds had gone dark. How is this possible? Theron demanded. It's one ship, one human vessel against the entire Imperial fleet. Sir. His aide, Captain Vex, spoke carefully. Our scouts report that the humans aren't using the same ship anymore. They're using our own vessels against us. Theron turned from the display. Explain. When they hit Korvax Prime, they captured 6 destroyers and 2 heavy cruisers. When they attacked the Nexus shipyards, they took 12 more ships. Each victory gives them more resources, more firepower. And their tactics? Vex hesitated. Unlike anything we've seen before, sir. They don't fight for territory or resources. They don't take prisoners. They don't make demands. They just eliminate everything. Theron felt a chill run down his scaled spine. The Valkyrie Empire had conquered dozens of species over the centuries. They understood how war worked. There were rules, patterns, predictable behaviors. Species fought for land, for wealth, for power. They could be negotiated with, bribed, or intimidated into submission, but these humans seemed to follow none of those rules. On the captured New Sol, Minho stood in the command center studying reports from their latest attack. Around him, the ship hummed with activity as humans worked at stations originally designed for much larger Valkyrie operators. Everything had been modified, rebuilt, optimized for human use. Engineering report, he called out. Taehoon, a former mining engineer who had become Minho's second-in-command, looked up from his console. All captured vessels are operational. We've completed modifications on the new destroyers. Weapon systems, upgraded. Crew quarters resized. Navigation computers reprogrammed. How long until the fleet is ready for the next phase? 6 hours, maybe less. Minho nodded. The humans had learned to work with frightening efficiency. Every captured ship was stripped down and rebuilt in days, not weeks. Every Valkyrie weapon was studied, improved, then turned against its creators. But more than that, they had learned to think like their enemies. Valkyrie military doctrine was based on overwhelming force and intimidation. They relied on their size and strength to frighten opponents into surrender. The humans had studied that doctrine carefully, then designed tactics specifically to counter it. Sir, called out Nari from the communication station. She had joined them after the liberation of a Valkyrie prison transport. We're receiving a transmission from the Valkyrie High Command. It's addressed to us specifically. Put it on screen. The main display flickered, then showed a massive Valkyrie in ornate armor standing in what was obviously a military command center. His scales were silver with age and his eyes burned with frustrated fury. "I am Admiral Theron of the Velakri High Command," the alien began. "I am authorized to negotiate the terms of your surrender." Several humans on the bridge laughed bitterly. The sound made Theron's eyes narrow. "You have proven yourselves as warriors," he continued. "This conflict has gone on long enough. We are prepared to offer you your own world, recognition as an independent species, even reparations for your losses. All we ask is that you cease these attacks and enter into proper negotiations." Minho stepped forward so the alien could see him clearly. "I am Minho, speaking for all humans aboard this fleet. We have no interest in negotiations." "Be reasonable," Theron said, though Minho could hear the strain in his voice. "What do you want? Territory? Wealth? Name your price." "You want to know what we want?" Minho's voice was very quiet, but somehow it carried more menace than any shout. "We want you to understand something. You didn't attack a military target when you captured our ship. You didn't fight soldiers. You enslaved civilians, families, children." He paused, letting that sink in. "You used our children for entertainment. You killed them for sport. You treated human beings like animals for your amusement." Theron shifted uncomfortably. "That is the nature of conquest. The strong rule the weak. Surely you understand." "No," Minho cut him off. "We don't understand. We don't understand how any intelligent species could be so cruel to innocent people. But we're going to teach you something about human nature. What lesson could you possibly teach us? You're prey animals pretending to be predators." Minho smiled, and for the first time in his life, Admiral Theron felt truly afraid of another being. "We're going to show you what apex predators really look like when you threaten their young." The transmission ended. 3 days later, the humans hit the Velakri Military Academy on Drakmor. It was heavily defended, protected by orbital weapons, platforms, and a full battle fleet. The defenders were confident in their superiority. They lasted 43 minutes. The human attack was unlike anything in Velakri military experience. Instead of the frontal assault they expected, the humans struck from every direction at once. Ships appeared from hyperspace at impossible angles, their weapons already firing before Velakri sensors could lock onto them. But it wasn't just the tactical brilliance that shocked the defenders. It was the weapons themselves. Every shot was perfectly placed, every target precisely chosen. The humans didn't waste ammunition on non-essential systems. They struck power plants, command centers, life support systems. They killed with surgical precision. When the orbital defenses fell, the humans didn't send down troops to occupy the planet. They didn't demand surrender. They simply began bombarding military targets from orbit with methodical thoroughness. The civilian population centers were left untouched, but every military installation, every government building, every symbol of Velakri power was systematically destroyed. By the time the attack ended, Drakmor was still habitable. But it was no longer a Velakri military world. It was just another dead rock in space. In the Academy's final moments, the last surviving officer managed to send one desperate message. "They're not trying to conquer us. They're trying to erase us." Back on the New Sol, Yuna worked in her medical lab surrounded by screens showing Velakri biological data. Over the months since their escape, she had become something she never thought she would be: a weapons designer. The electromagnetic pulse that had started their rebellion was just the beginning. Now she was developing far more sophisticated tools of war, biological weapons that would target Velakri genetics while leaving other species unharmed, neurological toxins that could be delivered through their atmospheric recycling systems, viral agents that would spread through their populations with devastating efficiency. She told herself it was necessary. The Velakri were too numerous and too widely spread to defeat through conventional warfare alone. 50,000 humans, even with captured ships and superior tactics, couldn't match the raw numbers of an interstellar empire. But sometimes, late at night when the ship was quiet, she wondered what she was becoming. She had been a doctor once, sworn to heal and protect life. Now she spent her days designing new ways to end it. Then she would remember Sunho's terrified face and her doubts would disappear. Donghae had become the commander of their ground forces, Though ground forces was perhaps the wrong term, the humans rarely landed on enemy worlds anymore. They had learned that orbital bombardment was far more efficient than surface combat. But sometimes, when intelligence gathering was necessary, or when they needed to capture specific technologies, small teams would infiltrate Valkyrie installations. These missions required a special kind of soldier, someone who could move unseen through enemy territory, gather information, and eliminate targets without being detected. The Valkyrie had taught them well in the arts of brutality. Now the humans were proving to be excellent students. "Sir," one of his lieutenants reported, "our scouts have confirmed the location of the Valkyrie High Command facility. It's in the Valdris system, heavily fortified, protected by their entire reserve fleet." Donghae studied the tactical data on his screen. The Valdris system was the heart of Valkyrie power, home to nearly 10 billion aliens and defended by more firepower than they had ever faced before. "Estimated casualties for a direct assault?" he asked. 70% of our forces, minimum. Maybe total loss." Donghae nodded. A frontal attack would be suicide. But then they weren't planning a frontal attack. "Begin preparations for Operation Silent Night," he ordered. "Full biological protocol." His lieutenant hesitated. "Sir, the bioweapons haven't been tested on that scale before. We don't know what the long-term effects might be." "The long-term effect will be that there won't be any more Valkyrie to threaten human children," Donghae replied coldly. "That's the only effect I care about." Across the galaxy, the war continued with relentless efficiency. The humans struck without warning, destroyed their targets completely, then vanished before reinforcements could arrive. They fought with the cold precision of machines and the implacable fury of avenging angels. The Valkyrie tried everything. They offered surrender, but the humans ignored them. They attempted to negotiate but received no response. They even tried appealing to other galactic species for help, but most civilizations The war that followed became known in the deepest classified files of the Galactic Intelligence Services as the Silent Genocide. It lasted exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. When it ended, the Valkyrie Empire, a civilization that had dominated 43 star systems for over 2,000 years, had simply ceased to exist. No other species intervened. Most didn't even know a war was happening until it was already over. Dr. Kemal Voss of the Andrian Research Institute was among the first xenobiologists to study the aftermath. His classified report, buried in Federation archives and marked with the highest security clearance, painted a picture that would haunt galactic leadership for decades to come. "The efficiency is what disturbs me most," Voss wrote in his personal notes. "This wasn't the chaotic destruction of a species consumed by rage. This was systematic, methodical, almost clinical. The humans approached genocide the same way other species approach urban planning." His investigation had taken him to 17 former Valkyrie worlds. What he found on each one told the same story with horrifying consistency. On Korvax Prime, the humans had identified every military installation and destroyed them with precision strikes. But the civilian infrastructure, hospitals, schools, residential areas, remained completely untouched. The message was clear: surrender now, or we'll come back for the rest. The Valkyrie hadn't surrendered. On Drakmor, the pattern escalated. Military targets were still the primary focus, but government buildings and infrastructure had been added to the list. The planet could still support life, but it could no longer support a functioning society. By the time the humans reached the core worlds, their approach had evolved into something far more comprehensive. They no longer bothered with surgical strikes. Entire planets were rendered uninhabitable through biological weapons that targeted Valkyrie physiology specifically. Other species could walk on these worlds safely, but for the Valkyrie, the very air had become poison. Voss had spoken to refugees from the outer colonies, the few thousand Valkyrie who had managed to escape in the early stages of the conflict. Their accounts painted a picture of an enemy that defied every known pattern of warfare. "They don't take prisoners," one survivor had told him. "They don't demand surrender. They don't even speak to us anymore. They just arrive, do what they came to do and leave like we're not even worth talking to. Another refugee had provided even more disturbing details. We tried everything. We offered them our entire fleet. We offered them our homeworld. We even offered to become their slaves again if they would just stop. They ignored all of it. It's like they decided we shouldn't exist and now they're making that happen. But perhaps the most chilling account came from a former Velocri intelligence officer named Cortex, who had been off-world when his home colony was attacked. I studied the humans throughout the war, Cortex had whispered to Voss during their secret interview. I thought if I could understand their psychology, maybe I could find a way to negotiate with them. What I found was worse than I expected. Cortex had pulled up holographic displays showing human fleet movements over the 3-year period. What Voss saw made his blood run cold. The attacks weren't random. They followed a carefully planned progression, each strike building on the knowledge gained from the previous one. The humans had started by capturing military assets to study Velocri technology. Then they had targeted research facilities to understand Velocri biology. Only after they had gathered complete intelligence did they begin the systematic elimination of the species. They spent the first year learning everything about us, Cortex continued. Our weaknesses, our psychology, our culture, our technology. By the second year, they knew us better than we knew ourselves. The third year was just cleanup. Voss had asked the question that haunted every species in the galaxy. Why didn't they stop when your government offered to surrender? Cortex's answer would stay with him forever. Because they weren't fighting a war, Dr. Voss, they were solving a problem. And from their perspective, the problem wasn't Velocri military aggression or territorial expansion. The problem was that the Velocri existed at all. Halfway across the galaxy, in a secret facility that didn't appear on any official Federation maps, Director Sarah Chen of Human Strategic Intelligence read Dr. Voss's preliminary report with professional interest. As the head of humanity's most classified intelligence service, she was one of only 12 people in the entire Federation who knew the complete truth about the Velocri War. The humans who had destroyed the Velocri Empire were not rogue civilians who had snapped under pressure. They were not traumatized refugees acting out of pure emotion. They were the advance guard of humanity's true first contact with galactic civilization, a carefully planned operation that had been 50 years in the making. The real colony ship New Sol had never existed. The civilians aboard that vessel had been specially trained operatives, scientists, engineers, and military personnel who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history. Their job had been simple: let themselves be captured, study their captors, and then eliminate any threat they might pose to humanity's future expansion into the galaxy. Mission parameters successful, Chen wrote in her status report to the Human Colonial Council. Velocri threat neutralized. Cover story maintained. No Federation species aware of human capabilities. Recommend proceeding to Phase 2 of Galactic integration. The truth was that humanity had been watching galactic civilization for over a century. Silent observation posts scattered throughout Federation space had been monitoring alien communications, studying their technologies, and most importantly, cataloging their weaknesses. Every major species had been thoroughly analyzed, their military capabilities assessed, their psychological profiles developed. Earth's xenobiological research departments had files on over 300 alien species, including detailed plans for their pacification or elimination if they ever posed a threat to human interests. The Velocri had simply been the first to make themselves a problem. But the most disturbing aspect of Chen's files wasn't the scope of human intelligence gathering. It was the casual efficiency with which the entire operation had been planned and executed. The colony ship had been built specifically for capture, loaded with technology designed to appear primitive while hiding sophisticated surveillance and weapon systems. The civilians had undergone years of psychological conditioning to maintain their cover even under torture and abuse. Every aspect of their response to Velocri aggression had been war-gamed and practiced until it became second nature. Even their emotional reactions had been calculated. The anger, the desire for revenge, the apparent breakdown of civilized restraint, All of it had been carefully cultivated to provide motivation while ensuring that their real objectives remained hidden. Chen closed the file and turned to her next assignment, monitoring the integration of humanity into the Federation. So far, their performance as peaceful newcomers was proceeding exactly according to plan. In the Federation Council chambers on New Geneva Station, the representative from the Andrian Collective was raising concerns about certain gaps in the historical record. Honored colleagues, Dr. Voss's superior Counselor Threx addressed the assembly. We must acknowledge that the disappearance of the Valakri Empire represents a significant mystery. An entire species does not simply vanish without cause. The human representative, Ambassador Janet Kim, nodded gravely. The human colonial government shares your concerns, Counselor. We have offered to assist in any investigation the Council deems necessary. That is appreciated, Ambassador Kim. However, I must note that humans are the only major species to have had no contact with the Valakri during their period of expansion. This seems statistically unlikely. Ambassador Kim's expression remained perfectly diplomatic. I'm afraid human space was too remote from Valakri territory for significant contact to occur. We consider ourselves fortunate to have avoided their more aggressive tendencies. What she didn't mention was that human space had been kept deliberately remote from all major alien powers during the observation phase of their galactic strategy. Every human colony, every outpost, every listening station had been positioned to provide maximum intelligence value while maintaining the appearance of a small, insignificant civilization on the galactic periphery. Perhaps, suggested the Zephyrian representative, we should focus on ensuring that such a fate does not befall any other species. Clearly, some force exists in this galaxy capable of destroying entire civilizations. We must be prepared to defend ourselves. Several council members murmured agreement. It was exactly the response human strategists had predicted. Rather than investigating the disappearance of the Valakri, the Federation would focus on improving their defensive capabilities. This would inevitably lead to increased military spending, technology sharing, and expanded intelligence cooperation, all of which would benefit human intelligence gathering. The human colonial government would be honored to contribute to such defensive efforts, Ambassador Kim said smoothly. We may be newcomers to the galactic community, but we are committed to its protection. Over the following months, human volunteers joined Federation research projects focused on developing new. Back in the present day, Captain Jiho stood in his ready room aboard the UES Defiant, staring at the classified files his crew had recovered from the Valakri wreckage. 3 days had passed since their discovery, and each new piece of information made the picture more terrifying. Nari entered carrying a data pad, her face pale. Captain, I've finished analyzing the communication logs from the Valakri ship. You need to see this. Jiho gestured for her to sit down. Over the past few days, his communications officer had become more than just a colleague. She had become his conscience as they worked through the implications of what they had discovered. What did you find? The Valakri weren't just random raiders, sir. They were conducting systematic intelligence gathering on newly discovered species. That colony ship they attacked wasn't their first target. It was just the first time they encountered significant resistance. Nari activated her data pad, showing him a holographic display of Valakri operational records. Look at this. Over 50 years, they captured vessels from 17 different species. In every previous case, the pattern was the same. Capture, enslavement, extraction of technological and biological data, then disposal of the subjects. And in every case, the aliens submitted? Yes, sir. Most species either surrendered immediately or were quickly broken by Valakri interrogation techniques. The Valakri had built their entire intelligence operation around the assumption that technological civilizations were inherently passive when separated from their military support structures. Jiho studied the data with growing unease. But humans were different, completely different. According to these logs, the humans didn't just resist. They turned the entire situation into a learning opportunity. While pretending to be broken slaves, they were actually conducting their own intelligence gathering operation. She highlighted specific entries in the Valakri records. Look at these reports from their science teams. The humans weren't just trying to survive. They were systematically studying Velakri biology, technology, psychology, and military organization. Within weeks, they knew more about their captors than the Velakri knew about them. Jiho felt that familiar cold feeling in his stomach. Nari, pull up the current human personnel files in the Federation database. I want to see something. A few minutes later, they were looking at the official records of humanity's integration into galactic civilization. What they found there made both of them go very quiet. Dr. Una Park, currently serving as the Federation's leading expert on xenobiology and alien disease research. Her official biography listed her as a former civilian doctor who had gained her expertise through extensive field experience during humanity's early colonial period. Engineer Minho Choi, now directing the Federation's Joint Technology Exchange Program. His background was described as civilian infrastructure specialist with unique insights into alien engineering principles. Colonel Donghae Kim, military advisor to the Federation Security Council and instructor at the Joint Species Defense Academy. His file simply stated that he had extensive experience in unconventional warfare scenarios. Captain, Nari said slowly, these are the same people. The civilian refugees who destroyed the Velakri Empire are now in positions of authority throughout the Federation. Jiho nodded grimly. And they've been there for decades, slowly working their way into every important institution in the galaxy. But that would mean that humanity's integration into the Federation wasn't random. It was planned, orchestrated. The entire thing has been a 50-year intelligence operation. They sat in silence for several minutes, both trying to process the implications. Finally, Nari spoke up. Captain, what are we going to do with this information? Before Jiho could answer, his communication console chimed with an urgent priority message. The transmission bore the seal of Federation Emergency Command. Captain Park of the UES Defiant, you are ordered to return to Federation space immediately. A situation has developed that requires human assistance. Jiho accepted the transmission. On his screen appeared Admiral Sato, the human commanding officer of the Federation's Third Fleet. Behind him, Jiho could see the organized chaos of a military command center in crisis mode. Captain, we have a code red situation developing in the Outer Rim. The Kethri Mandate has attacked a human research station in the Kepler system. 200 civilian scientists are dead, including women and children. Jiho felt his blood turn to ice. Admiral, do we know why they attacked? Initial reports suggest they considered the research station a threat to their territorial expansion. They demanded the humans abandon the system and attacked when the scientists refused to leave. What are our orders, sir? Admiral Sato's expression was carefully neutral, but Jiho thought he could see something calculating in the man's eyes. The Federation Council is demanding we respond through proper diplomatic channels. They want negotiations, perhaps a formal protest through the Council's mediation system. And our response? We've agreed to handle this through appropriate channels. Of course. Admiral Sato paused meaningfully. Captain, you're being reassigned to the Kepler system for humanitarian assessment. Take your time getting there. Survey the damage thoroughly. Make sure we have a complete understanding of what happened. The transmission ended, leaving Jiho staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, but he could feel the tension in the air. Nari, he said, finally, how long will it take us to reach the Kepler system? At maximum warp, about 18 hours, sir. Set course, but maintain standard cruise speed. Sir? That will take us 3 days to get there. I know. Jiho looked around at his crew, all of them good people, loyal officers who trusted him to make the right decisions. I want time to think about this. 3 days later, the Defiant dropped out of warp at the edge of the Kepler system. What they found there was worse than Jiho had imagined. The human research station had been completely destroyed. Debris scattered across space told the story of a brief, brutal attack. The Kethri had used overwhelming force against a lightly defended civilian target. Captain, Taehyun reported from his engineering station, I'm reading 47 Kethri warships in the system. They're maintaining a blockade around the research station's location. Any response to our hails? They're ordering us to leave immediately. They claim this system is now under Kethri protection, and that human presence is no longer welcome. Jiho studied the tactical display showing Kethri ship positions. They had positioned themselves like conquerors, broadcasting their strength, and daring anyone to challenge them. It was exactly the kind of aggressive posturing that the Velakri had once used. "Sir," Jiwan said from her security station, "I'm detecting something else. There are other ships in the system, but they're running silent. Human ships." Jiho felt his pulse quicken. "How many?" "Hard to tell. They're using some kind of stealth technology I've never seen before. But based on the sensor shadows, at least 50 vessels. Maybe more. Are they Federation ships?" "No, sir. These are something else entirely." As if summoned by their conversation, Jiho's communication console chimed with an incoming transmission. The caller ID showed only a generic Federation routing code, but when the screen activated, he found himself looking at a face he recognized from the historical files. Dr. Yuna Park looked exactly as she had 50 years ago, though Jiho knew that was impossible. Either human medical technology was far more advanced than anyone realized, or this wasn't really a historical recording. "Captain Park," she said, using his family name in the traditional Korean manner. "I represent certain interested parties within the human community. We need to discuss the current situation. Dr. Park, according to Federation records, you should be over 90 years old." She smiled, and Jiho felt a chill run down his spine. It was the same smile he had seen in Admiral Sato's eyes, friendly on the surface but with something calculating underneath. "Captain, there are many things about humanity that aren't in the Federation records. Perhaps it's time you learned about some of them." "What do you want?" "To give you a choice. In approximately 6 hours, the Kethri fleet in this system will suffer a catastrophic systems failure. Their ships will lose power, life support will fail, and they will be forced to abandon their vessels. Some may survive in escape pods. Most will not." Jiho's crew turned to stare at him. The casual tone in which Dr. Park discussed the destruction of an entire fleet was more frightening than any threat. "And our role in this? You can file a report stating that the Kethri ship suffered technical failures during a routine patrol. Equipment malfunctions happen all the time in space. Very sad, but these things occur. And if I refuse? Then you'll file a report stating that the Kethri ship suffered technical failures during a routine patrol." Her smile never wavered. "Captain, I'm not asking for your cooperation. I'm informing you of what will happen and giving you the courtesy of choosing how to document it." The transmission ended, leaving Jiho's bridge in shocked silence. "Captain," Nari said quietly, "what are we going to do?" Jiho looked around at his crew, then at the tactical display showing Kethri ships confidently maintaining their blockade. They had no idea what was coming for them. Just like the Velakri 50 years ago, they had made the fatal mistake of harming human sea